the fact that the workplace changes daily. So for me, it's an honor to be on and talk about and define what that new workplace looks like. And we appreciate it, Mike.
Yeah, 100%. Absolutely. Well, guys, I want to jump into this.
So for me, it's an honor to be on and talk about and define what that new.
Are you guys getting a double feedback here?
Oh, we are.
Yeah,
absolutely.
That's interesting.
Well, guys, I want to jump into this.
Okay.
So,
I don't know where that's coming from. Hang on, guys. What I love is that we have technical issues. This being
I'm purple and you're hearing me twice. It's awesome.
I know. It's so great. So hopefully we got that taken care of. So guys, I want to jump into the pre-COVID workplace, because that's really what most people are accustomed to is, things how they used to be. I know that CEOs are driving people to come back to the workplace because that's how it used to be. So George, why don't I start with you? Why don't you just kind of describe some of the similarities of today? What's common in today's workplace versus yesterday's workplace, because that's really what people are struggling with.
Yeah, I think that's a great question, Mike. Whether the marketplace, particularly in the private sector, everybody has to understand we're for profit, right? So workplace is somewhat defined by the employer and the employee. You always ask yourself, is the 4-day or 3-day or 2-day or 7-day work week possible? Well, that's up to the employer or the employee after they define what it is they need to get done. So the similarities are, we're for profit. It's a highly competitive labor market. As rapidly as technology is changing, as rapidly as requirements are changing, just in the buy and sell community, as rapidly companies change hands, it's an ever-changing, highly competitive market for talent. And then, finally, it's not, and this is maybe dissimilar, but organizations, I guess you don't work for a job anymore for 30 years, right? It's there is very little loyalty in the marketplace. So adjusting and being ready for and adapting to that changing marketplace and the changing loyalty is extremely important today. And that's a huge thing when you're constantly in a training cycle with people. So I would say that's what's going on in today's market.
Yeah, no, I love that. So Gary, what do you want to add to that? George covered kind of, we're all profit driven, highly competitive marketplace. There's constant changes. But what is the workplace today? I think that's what people are struggling with.
They are. And let's go back to pre-COVID. There was a cultural norm that we all went to the office every day, right? There was no work from home. There was no remote. Zoom was not really used or thought of. It was like, you're here from this hour to this hour.
Yeah.
Then you go home Monday through Friday. And if you have family issues or kids or whatever, well, that's for you to solve outside of your workplace, right?
Right.
Make sure you're here on time. Make sure you're here till 5 or whatever, and then you leave.
Yeah.
Well, then there was this thing called COVID where everything changed instantly, right? That you couldn't go to the office.
Yeah.
Now we're doing Zoom and Teams and things we've never heard of before, and that became the norm. So you had this gigantic cultural shift from physical location, commutes. Commutes can be terrible. Depends where you live. Can be an hour. Could be expensive. Can be a 2-hour train ride, and you got to pay a lot of money. Especially when you got used to not doing that, it became kind of nice. Like, you know what? I can get work done. I can spend time with my family. I can be home for dinner. And now this is where the challenge comes in. What we're talking about is, what's the post-COVID workplace look like where we've tasted something better, right? It was better than what we had. We didn't know it could happen, but we did, and everyone bought into it. Now we're in that mode. Well, like George said, so we have these norms where you got to go back in the office, and it was just there. But now it's pushback. It's like, I don't know if I want to do that. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, I think you're hitting something, because 72% of employees are saying, listen, if we don't have flexibility, like if I can't choose when I come into the office or whether or not I choose to come into the office, I'm going to look for a different job. And why why do CEOs want people back in the office? Let's start there. I mean, that's the, hey, listen, Gary, you just pointed out, like, I can do my work from home, and now you say return to office. Why do I need to return to office? I've already proven I can do it from my home.
Well, and when I say my work, that's a blanket statement. I'm old school, so I think there's value. And Mike, you and I meeting to talk about an issue, and maybe we whiteboard something out, right?
Yeah.
Now it doesn't have to be every day, but I firmly believe some of our best ideas and collaboration comes in person.
Yeah.
It's those little subtle hints, reading body language, and someone might sneak something in. Oh, well, tell me more about that. You don't get that on Zoom. You log in on time, everyone leaves on time, and that's it.
Yeah.
So I think it's difficult to balance. I do think there's value in being in the office. I do think there's value in we're relational beings, right? We do. It is important to have a sense of belonging, because if I'm only Zoom, if I'm only remote, am I really engaging?
Yeah. Yeah.
Example, sorry to jump in there, Mike, but I'll use an example. A recent client, we did an integration, and when we work in the middle market, lower middle market, these companies undergo a huge amount of churn as changes take place, whether it be leadership or process or policy. There's a huge amount of concern on all of the employees, and it weighs heavy on them. Not only have they been through a difficult process of change and going through a sale agreement, but now they have to get used to new leadership and new culture. And when the leadership isn't there, the culture never really develops. I mean, and what I find also in the COVID era, and we've seen this with some ERP implementations that we were doing during COVID, is that, people say, well, a hybrid job works. Well, it's kind of unfair to say that for your entire workforce.
Yeah.
You're a manufacturing firm, everybody's standing at their machines and making products. If you're in a service industry, you go when it's time to go. Leadership's kind of gotten, in my opinion, has kind of gotten lazy post-COVID, because they've had and I'm not saying that in a derogatory way, I'm saying it in a critical way, even myself. We've had the ability to go to Zoom. We haven't had to get on a plane. We haven't had to spend weeks on the road.
Yeah.
What the reality is like Gary says, we are relational beings. And in order for things to stick, and you've got to define what the new office looks like. You've got to return to a culture-driven environment, which culture is not driven by Zoom. If you want your culture driven by Zoom, you're not going to have a relational environment. And finally, leadership has a responsibility to practice what they preach and instill that vision and engagement. If that means being there and leading the efforts and leading their troops, they need to be there. And COVID's made that a little bit lazy. I don't know what your thoughts are, Mike, but what I see is that leaders aren't as willing to travel. They've just gotten comfortable with the Zoom impact.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I'll admit, I mean, it is so easy. It's much easier. Let's put it that way. It's much easier to drive revenue, business, team engagement via technology. I mean, we had to shift in COVID. We used to do everything live and in person, and I'd spend a lot of days on the road. And then when we had to go to really deploying technology, at first I hated it. But then I got really used to it. And I'll just give you guys an example. Yesterday, I had to be, 50 miles south of my house. It was so interesting because it took me an hour to get there in the morning when I left, but it took me almost 2 hours to get back home. Right.
Wow.
And so, when you think about that, that's 3 hours out of a day. Now, granted, I'm working the phones and doing everything else while I'm traveling in my car. But I think about that, could I have fast-tracked that had I not been there? And Gary, to your point, the reality is no, I couldn't. Yes, but no, sitting down over a cup of coffee, pressing the flesh, working through some issues, engaging in a whole new strategy on a project, that could have been done via Zoom, but not with the same outcome, I believe. So it's really, and I want to tap on this. How do we inspire people to go back to work? Because we're talking about what does the post-COVID workplace look like? Is it, if you don't come back, you're fired? Or is it, hey, we've got a hybrid model, we've got a flex model? And why should I even come back, Gary? Seriously, like you've already said I could do my job from here. I understand your whole point of, really culture, but really, I
Yeah.
mean, why should I come back?
And that's the big challenge because
Yeah.
at some point, not to mention the fact companies have enormous amounts of investment in physical locations, right? So maybe I'm stuck in my lease for the next 10 years. I built out this beautiful space that everybody loved. I got foosball tables and whatever, and no one's here.
Yeah.
What do I do with it?
Yeah.
Nobody wants it. I can't sublease it because there's no demand, right? So I see value in like, hey, at least, flatter me and come to work once a week, a couple times a week, because I need to see butts in the seats to make it look like I made a good investment, right? But
Yeah.
that's a big struggle. I like the term that George used, return to culture.
Yeah.
That there needs to be a reason, because maybe it's our, kind of a little bit advanced in our career guilt where we need to be there, be on time, be early. Maybe it's not so prevalent anymore. Maybe it's like, you know what? There needs to be a reason why I'm needed. Like, why do I need to be there specifically?
Yeah.
And why do you want my opinion? If you don't ask my opinion, if I go there and I sit in my cube for hours and you don't acknowledge me, then what's the purpose?
Yeah. Yeah. Boy, that's a
Yeah,
great.
Mike,
Yeah.
post-COVID, I noticed, and Gary, to your point, what is the purpose? I worked for a large technology firm based in Seattle, and it was pretty much, and as much as the culture said it was remote and hybrid and flexible, it was butts and seats. And so I'd go into work every day and I'd wonder why I made the 2-hour commute each way to get there and sit in the office, and when I could have saved that 4 hours and spent it with my family and done the work from home. Instead of being there 5 days a week, right? And losing 20 hours on the road. That's what we look at as employees. We're kind of selfish that way. Okay, what am I losing in this deal? Well, the employer has to make it, give them a reason. It has to make it something that they're gaining. Okay, I don't think that any human being, other than those human beings who are in frontline jobs or frontline management roles, and it's not fair, it's not necessarily equitable, they have to be there. They have to be to run the show, to keep things moving. Some management can be there 3 days a week. Some management can be there 2 days a week. Flexibility with a reason. I don't think you just tell an employee, come sit in the chair, smile and nod just to show me that you're here, because that's poorly defined work culture anyway. Give the employee a reason to be here. We want you here on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And on Tuesdays and Thursdays, we're going to have these expectations and these deliverables, because we're all going to be here on Tuesdays and Thursdays. We're going to have our stand-ups. We're going to have our project reviews. We're going to have our one-on-ones. We're going to have Q&A sessions. We're going to reach out to these 5 customers and clients. We're going to do our training on those days. The other days, you have your other projects, work from home. I mean, the old adage of sitting in your pajama pants and socks and wearing a button-up shirt is the only drawback to going back to work, just doesn't work anymore. You got to give employees a reason to show up.
Yeah, I kind of love that idea. Be really clear in what we're going to accomplish on those 2 or 3 days we're back in the office, right? Like, guys, when you come in, and I think, Gary, you said something, and this is just semantics. I joke with, my team. I'm like, I really don't want to hear your opinion. I do want to hear your advice. Like, that's why I hired you. Like, you can have an opinion on something. I don't know that I necessarily want to hear that, but I'd love to hear your advice, because that's really, I mean, we're shooting for a moonshot, right? Every project we take on is really kind of our moonshot. And if we take those 2 or 3 days that we're in office and we're going, okay, guys, clearly defined objectives, right? I think, George, that's what you were speaking to, is
Sure.
You being here today is X. Am I tracking?
Yeah. I mean, if you're there 2 days a week or 3 days a week, what is the rhythm and cadence of the meetings and why you're there? Or do you just have to be there to smile and nod? Now, if I was an employee in today's market environment and I had marketable skills and they said that I had to commute an hour and a half each way to be in the chair and smile and nod, I would have a decision to make. Is the 3-day work week possible? I would quit and find something else, because that doesn't fit in with what I want to do. So, we blame it all on the employer, but the employee has a choice too. I think you recently saw the article, Mike, in the Seattle Times about the Amazon employee who chose to no longer come into the office and during COVID moved to, I think, Kentucky or something like that. And now Amazon says you have to come into the office. They're terminating him. Well, the employee's making a choice, right? And the employer's making a choice. I say behind that choice, there has to be a reason to come to the office. Set a regular cadence, a regular rhythm, and what you're going to do those days as a team. There's no need to be an individual contributor sitting in a box all day long, unless you're going to be doing group activities the days you're in the office.
Wow. So we've really got to kind of change the dynamic of the workplace in many ways to, it's kind of this whole new story, wouldn't you say, Gary? Like the old story was get here, butts and seats, do your work, whatever, I can replace you if I need. And now the employee has kind of said, wait a second, we understand this new culture, which was me at home, being able to navigate and do my thing. And now why can't we just kind of be fixed on the mission, flexible on the method? Like if you give me deadlines and I hit those deadlines, why go back? And you guys are saying, no, we got to create this new culture, this reason, this purpose.
I think we're leveraging what you're saying of being flexible on the method, and fixed on the mission. The method is a relationship between the employee and the employer. They need to establish a relationship that works for them. Some employers will say, no, that does not work. I mean, you can't make a cheeseburger remotely. So obviously you have to be in the office. You can't build a team remotely. I think we've seen that, COVID. I think we've all done the COVID happy hours, and those aren't much fun, right? So not a huge team building exercise, but like you said, Mike, we are revisioning what the workplace looks like, but at the same time, I think we're also reevaluating what that relationship between employee and employer looks like, and clearly defining expectations of both. That's
Gary,
where we
what
are.
would you say to? Yeah, George, that's spot on. Gary, what would you say to that? Like if I'm an employee and you're my employer, I mean, how do I negotiate that, or how do I even bring that up? Like if you're like, hey, everybody's got to be back 5 days a week, that's it. Do I just assume that like if I don't want to spend 3 hours or 20 hours a week in traffic. So, Gary, what's your advice to employees that are like, listen, I love my job, I just don't want to go back?
Well, and even some of the things that were mentioned earlier was, we got the folks that maybe are based in Seattle, but they moved to Kentucky or Dallas or Florida, right? There's plenty of that going on too, where at one point, either implied or absolute, the employer said, we're not going to return to work.
Yeah.
Well, then that's carte blanche. I can move wherever I want. And I did, right? And now they're saying, hey, we really didn't mean that. We really want you back in the office. And I've heard of employers trying to create radiuses. Like if you're within 50 miles, well, that's not fair either, because maybe I didn't move, but maybe I'm within 25-mile radius. I still don't want my hour-and-a-half commute. Right?
Yeah.
Because if I were to move to Florida, then I don't have to come in at all.
Yeah.
There's not, it's hard to negotiate, but it's such a, we're talking culture too. It's such a difficult thing to define and to make a really good culture and engage folks on a regular basis. And everyone's a little different. So you got to engage even amongst your team. If you have 10 team members, they're all going to have different hot buttons about what they care about, right? Some people want to be in the office every day. They miss it. Some people can't stand it, the thought of it. They want nothing to do with it. How do you handle, even amongst my team, I have 10 people, 3 would say, I'm here every day. 3 might say, maybe partial. 4 might say, no, I'm out. Do I have to let those people go? What's fair to the team? Or is there some sort of compensation? Maybe I help pay for their train cost, or, there's different things you got to do to make it fair. But it's turning into, there's no one size fits all, because it also depends, how valuable is this employee to me?
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think it puts a lot of onus on leadership. As I hear both of you talk, like as a leader, I can't just say, hey, you know what, 8 to 5, you're here, do the work. And, if we miss deadlines, we're missing deadlines. Or if you don't hit the deadline, you're fired, and I just find somebody else to sit, in that spot, right? I think what you guys are saying is the workplace is really diverse now. We now have a number of different options. People can make these alternative choices. We've kind of set some protocols in place because of COVID and people being able to work remotely. And now we're saying, no, we're going back to the 19th century model or the 20th century model, which everybody's a factory worker, get here, punch the clock, and then punch out. And I don't care I don't care about anything else. What you guys are saying is, no, we really have to define culture, number one. Number two, we have to be clear in the expectation when you are in the office, which isn't just, hey, pound your keyboard and work and nobody's going to engage you. It's a lot as an employer for you suddenly to say, hey, Mike, when everybody's here, you've got to have a clear directive of how you're going to use every one of those people on your team on that specific day in order to push the mission forward, which is probably what we should have been doing a long time ago, right? Is what I'm hearing you guys say, that maybe we got
100%, Mike, 100%.
Yeah.
Nobody asks, once you receive your orders, nobody asks you how you feel or if you want to get there when you're supposed to get there, or nobody asks me as a service person or consultant, well, how do you feel about showing up at this time? I'm told to be there, right?
Right.
And at the same time, I'm going back to the leadership has gotten a little lazy with COVID of taking an active role in defining that mission, defining the vision, and being a part of the execution. The most important thing, being a part of the execution. You can't just come in and say, you're here 3 days a week. That's the way I want it because I feel like productivity is going to increase, and disappear. You are a leader, and part of leadership means being in the trenches, right?
Yeah.
Working with them, getting the mission across, why you're there, and defining that clearly. I think that's one of the biggest changes and struggles that we're going to see. The marketplace is the marketplace. Employees are going to like it or they're not going to like it, and they're going to take their marketable skills somewhere else. Leadership can prevent that from happening by being engaged. The reason you are here today, or the reason we are changing this, is X. We need you to be a part of X. Here is what it is costing us. Here's what it is costing you, but the benefits are X. Define them and then stay in touch with them. Maybe 2 weeks from now, it goes to 2 days a week. Maybe 2 months from now, it goes to 4 days a week. But at least be engaged as a leader. Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%. I think that's, and people should be paying attention to that even more with the rise of AI and everything that's going on with AI. You got to love working from home. You guys probably hear the dog in the background. The people are concerned.
To piggyback on George though, because as we've seen, and I've heard more folks talk recently about the recession.
Yeah.
Like a year ago, hey, if I don't like what's going on, bye. I'm going to find a new job immediately. I think that's changing. I think I'm hearing of layoffs. I'm hearing of downsizing. I'm hearing of, CEOs are holding back on investment. They're nervous about a recession, all those things. So this assumption that I can say, you know what, this doesn't work for me. I'm going to do my own thing. I'm not so sure that's going to be as much of an option going forward.
Yeah, that's a good point. And certainly, I think to piggyback on that, Gary, is AI and the emergence of AI and how companies are using, AI and some people concerned about their jobs. I think that goes back to what you both are saying, is the importance of culture and understanding that if a company hires you, they hired you because they saw value in you. So you should show up, 1, 2, 3 days a week, and make sure the leadership sees your value, understands your value. Because if you're not there, they could just say, that's an easy cut for me to make because I don't see the guy anyway.
Right. There's no face assigned to it, right? It's because it's an emotional decision if you got to cut. But if that person's distant, it takes away something.
Yeah, agreed.
It would be interesting to see, Mike, you bring up AI, all of the productivity tools that are being built into the Microsoft suite of products, Google products, Amazon, AWS products. As you use the Microsoft suite, I am sure there's a reason that these large companies have said, okay, we need our workforce to come back this number of days. I wonder if it has anything to do with their ability to rapidly see the length of hours, the number of hours, the productivity that gets done, or project lag, or just plain traffic on their networks to determine that, we might be getting 50% of work for 100% of the pay, right? AI gives data like nobody's business in real time for companies. So, yeah, I mean, you bring up a very good point. It would be interesting to see if any of these decisions are driven by productivity software or tools.
Well, and George, and we got to wrap it up here, but I think there's something that you bring up that I've been a large advocate of for years is, listen, I'm going to pay you for 40 hours, but if you can get this task done in 20, like I know that the project takes 40 hours, but if you're efficient and you get it done, and you hit your milestones and you hit your measurements and you get that done in 35 hours, good for you. That's an incentive, right? For you to hit the target, get it done, and you just banked 5 hours, go. That should be an incentive. I think in the workplace, we oftentimes go, well, I'm going to pay you for 40 hours. And if you're efficient and you're productive, but, Pete over here is getting paid the same 40 hours and not productive, what type of culture are we setting, right? Like I want to breed a culture of people that are motivated, inspired, et cetera, want to move the mission forward and do it faster. Maybe that's something that we have to evaluate as employers, as company leaders, to really say, hey, what are we paying for? Are we paying for this person's expertise, their performance, but really their ability to drive outcomes? Or are we just paying for butts and seats? Does that make sense? Am I making sense on that?
Yeah, that's an excellent point, Mike.
For loyalty. A lot of folks pay for loyalty. And that's great. It's important. But what goes along with that?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I'm just going to go back to what we do. IKC it stands for integrity, knowledge, and commitment. That's what you're paying your employees for. Everybody says, the human resources or human capital. At the end of the day, you want integrity, knowledge, commitment, and output. You want a result. Leaders have to drive that. Individual contributors need leaders to explain that to them. The hybrid, however that company defines the workplace, at the end of the day, an employee is being paid to move, like you said, move the mission forward, execute the plan. So I agree with what you're saying, Mike.
Yeah. No, that's good. Well, guys, I want to wrap it up. I don't know that we solved the problem. I do think that there's options. We've provided options for people, but Gary and George, Gary, I'll start with you. Any last words, and how do people get a hold of you?
Yeah, no, I think this return to culture thing is big. I think that to me is like the overarching thing we want to reinforce. You can reach me at ikc.llc. I work, pretty closely with George, and look forward to hearing folks' feedback.
Yeah. George, how do people get a hold of you? And
they can reach out directly, george.bennett@ikc.llc, or on LinkedIn, they can find the page IKC LLC. More than happy to have this discussion further and talk more. And again, Mike, thanks for having us. Like Gary said, culture eats cash for lunch every day. You're going to lose cash if you have bad culture. So getting back to a culture that works is extremely important. Thanks for having us on.
Yeah, absolutely. Love it, guys. Absolutely love it.